Hello, everybody. My name is Emmy. In addition to the mouthful that Ryan just mentioned, I work for the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And last year, I had the pleasure of announcing Anouk Wipprecht here in Toronto at DigiFest. And I think the quality of this speaker definitely trumps the quality of the spring weather outside, even though it's amazing. But you're doing very well in being here, I think. So why am I here, someone from the Dutch government? Well, Anouk's performance is part of a long-standing Dutch tradition of invention, and especially in technology, we've been a front-runner. We've invented the CD, we've invented Wi-Fi, we have invented these NXP chips that are in your smartphone and on your credit card. So actually, perhaps without knowing it, every day you're in touch with Dutch technology. You are in touch with the Dutch. And these are inventions that add value to user experience, and they also add value to trying to solve the problems we have. Anouk does that too. She adds value to companies like Google and Microsoft, big corporates, but she also adds value by sharing her experiences and her work process with children and using open sources to sharing what she's learning and passing it on to others. And that's a great thing, I believe. So our mission of our office here in Toronto, we're on Dundas Square, and our mission is to connect the Dutch to you, the future of invention in Canada. So feel free to welcome us, but please first welcome Anouk.
Hey everybody. So that was a very nice introduction to me. This is my second time in Toronto. It's always lovely to come back here. Very welcoming. I love the city. I also had just a flight of 28 hours, so I might not be that fully aware of all the things that are going on here. I talk fast. I talk a lot. So you're in it for a ride. My background is fashion design and also engineering, and I combine these things together. I started when I was pretty young. I was 14 years old, and I started with fashion design because I thought fashion was cool. For me, fashion was about expression, and it was about communication, sort of the things that we wear. I was pretty introvert at that time, sort of. I looked a lot like clips, for example, and I saw how people were expressing themselves in clips, and I thought that was really interesting, you know. So I got into fashion. But as I went into fashion and in tailoring and in couture, so I did tailoring and couture. These fabrics that I was designing with, and these designs that I was creating, they were not talking to me. They were not speaking to me. They were not moving. Sort of, the garments that I was making were analog, and I wanted to create another notion. I wanted my garments to be electronic, digital, moving, breathing, sort of. So when I was 18 years old, I started to look into another field. It's called robotics, and these robots had for me the brain, and they had for me the heartbeat, sort of, that I wanted. So I started to work with microcontrollers, like little computer boards, and this is what I have done ever since. So I'm going to show you some of my work in this field and some of the projects, and I hope that you can learn something through this, through going through this process. The first one that I want to point out is for a car brand. It's called Audi. And they came up to me in order to do a project with me, sort of. And I said to them, okay, that's cool, give me a car. And I do that. And this car was not to drive in, sort of. This car was to hack into, sort of. I'm also a hacker. So basically, I took out the parking sensors and also the high power LEDs of this car, the LED matrix technology, and I put it in my dresses. So basically, you see in the front, you see a parking sensor, and as people come close, they start to blast out 60-watt high power LEDs. So that's pretty bright, as you can imagine, sort of. I based this on a little computer board created by Paul Stoffenregen. It's called a fitc. And here are some states in between. This is another dress with 11 little servo motors that I'm still working on that is blasting out of its shape. and also a production map dress, so a dress that is changing face, sort of. So in total, this is a collection of 11 pieces. They have been walking 120 shows in China. In China at the car shows for Audi. For me, this was a really cool project because it was really blending my DNA as a designer with the identity of the company of Audi, sort of. What I didn't like about walking around at car shows, I did a project for a car show before. I saw all these girls, sort of, and they were presented as displays, sort of. They were in short skirts and they were sort of tigering over these Lamborghinis and Ferraris and all that stuff. And this was prone to be sort of sexy, but I found it very humiliating in a way, you know. So what I wanted to do with Audi is I wanted to work on something else, putting up a really strong silhouette, sort of. So the girls that are on this show, they have a really strong posture, sort of, and they're pretty badass, sort of. Trying to see how we could change this notion of sort of girls being sex symbols at these car shows and making them badass and the drivers of the cars instead of sort of the seducers for you to buy this car. So again, this for me is a product that is really close to my heart because it's blending this DNA and the identity, sort of, as I talked about. And it's also blurring the lines, sort of. And I really think that as a designer, you have this notion of that you can create such statements, sort of, and change this world in a way. Another of my dresses is a funny one. It's a cocktail dress, and it's a real cocktail dress because it's making cocktails. Actually, tonight at a mixer at I guess 10 o'clock, I took one of my dresses with me, a white version of this dress, and so yeah, she's serving drinks tonight at a party. If you guys are coming there, this project is for Cirque du Soleil, and as you might know, Cirque du Soleil is a theater. They also have hospitality, sort of. So basically, they have a nightclub in Las Vegas, and they have a restaurant in Ibiza. So for this restaurant, I created a series of dresses. They're in gold, white, pink, black. And they're walking around in the restaurant. They're based on a little microcontroller of my own that I designed with Paul Stofferegen. It's a pink teensy. And basically what it does, you can see here. The model is pushing on a button. There's a peristaltic pump in the back. And it's allowing the liquid to go to the front. She's serving gin and tonic. And there's a little UV light in the front, so it makes the little drink light up, sort of. And that's for me a funny one. For me, it's a very social dress, sort of, as she's a pretty good hit on a party. My main research is, though, about the space that we have around the body. So basically, you can see that like this: the intimate space, the personal space, the social and the public space. And we all have this around us. But depending on personality, depending on your moods, depending on culture, different cultures, for example, these spaces differ. And I think that's a really interesting notion. These spaces get smaller or bigger, depending on a lot of situations, sort of. I reflect a lot of my designs towards these spaces, and I also base it on animals. And then I don't look at, for example, we talk about biomimicry, not only how structures move and how animals are being created, sort of, but also about their behavior, about their moods, or about, for example, their defense mechanisms, which I think is really interesting. And I correlate this from a technological point of view back to system behavior. So I copy things that I see in nature, that I sense in nature, and I try to correlate that to my systems. So basically, this is an octopus or a celapod, and it's pushing out ink, and it can dive away, sort of. Based on that notion, I created a dress with sensors all surrounding, and the more people there are in the space around this dress, the more smoke is being ejected in the space, which you can see here. Was for Autodesk pop-up gallery in Paris. So the smoke dress has 9 versions. The first version was with dry ice and a drip system. That was in 2005, 2006. It went well on a doll. It went not that well on a model because as we were doing a photo shoot, there was a coexistence between the chemicals and the lights, and my model fainted. So some things are like trial and error. It was good. It was also a friend of mine, sort of. But from things you learn, I learned pretty drastically here. So this dress has 9 versions, from this disaster one to the current version, which is 3D printed. This dress has been created in Maya with a collaborator of mine, Nicolo Casassi, he's an architect, and together we were looking at how we could create a structure that would have this shell-like feature, but is also flexible. So we started to look into an SLS process. So basically I'm using selective laser sintering. You have 3 kinds of 3D printing. You can print in like your plastics, you can print in your liquids or your resins, and you can print in powders. So the process that I'm using is selective laser sintering, and it's created through a machine which has a CO2 laser beam and is materializing the file in a sort of a layered powder structure. For me that's really cool because I do not use any support material. Basically my design you can just pull out of this basket and all the powder falls off, especially if you're going into like difficult geometries, or what I do here using a rubbery material, which is a thermoplastic polyurethane. This is a good process, sort of, with a pretty big bounding box as it is now. So the structure is flexible in a rubbery material, yet it's not as functional or as comfortable maybe as a garment, sort of. But I think by us designers, or for example fashion designers or interaction designers, pushing this field, there are like machines that are allowing us to create in a more comfortable sense, sort of. Here you can see the front and the back. My system is in the back, and this is a design from 2011, 2012. So it's an older one, but it's very dear to me. So I talked about connecting the body to the surroundings, sort of. But another thing that I try to do is connecting the body to connecting the design to the body, and I use for that wireless biosignals. So I'm trying to use in different designs and different projects a different set of signals that I pull from the body, for example. And all these signals, all these sensors and sensory systems sort of have a different place on the body. So you have your brain, you have your pulse, you have your muscle contraction, skin conductancy, respiration, so your lung volume, accelerometer, so the place in space, HRV, so heart rate, the heart rate and also the heart volume, and also the temperature, and connecting that, for example, to the set of sensors that I already have. One of the projects that I was busy with on a more monitoring agent was for Intel. This is called Synapse, and I created a little headset using the NeuroSky, which for me was more EMG than EEG. I found out later it's more about the way your eyebrows sort of and your frontal facial directions are moving than that is actually about brain signaling. Still, it was good for me to use because I was trying to get a notion of her attention level, sort of. And when her attention level was pulling me, giving me a signal, the camera, a little camera in the front of the design went off, and also the proximity sensors in the shoulders that I'm using. So basically, I let my model walk around. This was during CES in Las Vegas, and she was playing a game with like little high power LEDs in front. But what I was seeing in my computer, sort of, I saw who was invading her space, who was in her immediate environment. I saw what she was looking at, so the notion of computer vision, and I also saw how her body was reacting to that, sort of. So that was for me a very sort of internal design, which I later on used for the following project, which is about fun and accessibility. I was earlier this year at Ars Electronica, which is a famous media center in Linz in Austria, one of the oldest ones actually. You guys might know it from Ars Electronica, which is every September, in the beginning of September, and it's a really cool festival about digital art and sort of the future of technology. I could do a residency there, and in my residency I wanted to create, instead of another dress, sort of, I wanted to make a device, and I wanted to make a device for children with ADHD. What I tried to research was from something called the 10-20 system, which is all a whole singularity of like electrodes on the head. I wanted to see if I could get a better sense of the attention that I was speaking about in my former project, Synapse. And what I found out was that there's a wave called the P3 wave, so P300 of the ERP, that I could use actually in a medical EEG way in order to trigger a button in order to let the camera go on, sort of. And while I was researching this potential, sort of, I saw that the electrodes were making a sort of a mohawk style sloth on the head, and there were some electrodes placed in the backside of the design, which allowed me to make something that I really like, and it's called a unicorn. It's a unicorn horn with a little camera in there, sort of. So what I tried to create there was a little unicorn horn with a camera in there, and as soon as the attention of the child was spiking, sort of, this camera would go off. So the electrodes are embedded in the headset, and I have been trying to find a way to get a sense of the attention level. For me, it was really important to look at, for example, how we are treating ADHD now, which is mostly with medicine. So it's synthetics, putting synthetics to children, sort of, in order for them to make them not behave like children. For me, that's a really bad thing in my mind. And instead of that, I wanted to create a device that doesn't numb them or numb their feelings, but actually educates them on how their brain works. So this is a little movie on the headset while we're still testing it. If this wants to work. So what I'm using here is a gold plate electrode. Sometimes I make a movie in the beginning, sort of, as soon as I establish the design, and to see how that goes also for user experience, sort of. So this was the headset without the electrodes, and from that point on, I started to look in how this could work. I found a company in Linz. It's called G-Tech, and they have 60% of the world market of medical ED, and I asked them if I could collaborate with them for this project. So basically, these are gold-plated electrodes, and for me they're really cool because you don't need any gel. So normally for electrodes you need a gel, and your whole head is just dirty, sort of, and gnarly. But these little electrodes could point through the hair, sort of, and make a direct connection to the skin, as you could see here. So that is the set of electrodes that I'm working with. Then embedding them in the headset. See what kind of data we could get out of there. Basically, the only thing that I do not need to see the behavioral aspects of all the brain signals together. What I just want to have was 3 pointy signals from the 1020 system that I could have as an allowance for this camera to go on. So basically, I use the brain signal as an on-off button. And based on the Intel Edison, you can see here, based on a little battery, it's sending out through a web interface to my computer. So basically, it's recording 5 seconds as soon as the signal is being hit, 3 seconds prior, and it sends out 8 seconds to my computer. And what I wanted to see is 2 things. Like, first of all, instead of your medication, how you could create a device that that allows an educational factor, sort of, for these kids to learn something about themselves. The other thing is genuine data, sort of, which I call here, because if I put a child with a 1020 system in a white room with a doctor in a medical situation in a hospital, sort of, this child is not going to be themselves, sort of. So that's not good for me, because it takes for me 20 minutes in order for this child to be in a playful state or to be a child, to be themselves, sort of. So this is something that I call genuine data, because by creating this notion of a unicorn horn, there's a few of them. There's a white one, a black one, and a pink one, sort of. These kids walk up to it and they're already in a little sort of playful state. They're already in a little fantasy world, sort of. And I am much faster being able to get a sense of data out of these kids, sort of, in order to play with them. And for me, it's something close to my heart, both from the playful aspect as well the notion of like thinking outside of the box, sort of, or trying to find ways, also with research institutes, to make, like for example, medical treatment a little bit more, a little bit better. The last project that I will present is going back to these circles again. And these circles are based on something else that I'm a fan of. His name is Edward T. Hall, and he's the ground founder of the theory of proxemics. Basically, he has been traveling around a lot in the 60s, and he saw that different people had different personal spaces, sort of different cultures. What I have been talking about. He has been describing this in a book. It's called The Hidden Dimension. And also in some of his other work, and I thought it was fascinating. He was doing these measurements with a stick, so in a very analog manner, sort of. So he was measuring it out with a stick. And what I try to do is I try to take his research and I try to redirect that to using sensors. So I use, for example, proximity sensors, and I'm considering these spaces again, sort of. So that's the last project that I will tell something about. It's also based on another creature that I like. It's called a spider. In robotics, we talk about degree of freedom. So the more degree of freedom a robot has, the more you can do things with it, sort of. And if you look at sort of the spider in a mechanical way, a spider has a lot of features that can allow for this degree of freedom. So I was working at Intel in Portland in Oregon, and I already had created a version which was 3D, which was laser cut, sort of. Prior, and I wanted to see what I could do if I could get a little bit more intelligence in here, sort of. So this is the albino version of the spider dress. So basically, it's a dress, and it has sensors in the front, under her chin, sort of. And as soon as you come into the personal space of this design, it's attacking you. So as means of like, don't come closer or stay the fuck out of my space. The other cool thing that it has is I programmed 12 states of behavior. So looking at animals again, and also the moodiness or system behavior, sort of. So basically, depending on where you are in the space, how fast you walk up and where you're standing in the space, this design is reacting differently. So in the Netherlands, for example, where I am from, people are very profound of being intimidating in many ways. I found out through this design. So they walk up very fast, very close by, and this system is just reacting on its most aggressive states. If I'm in America, in the US, I call it more the gentleman state. People are a little bit more on an certain distance, sort of. So this design would more like wrap in the air and like dance around a little bit more. If you come then too close, it goes into a sort of a fencing mode. I call it Jugendstil. So basically, if you're too far away, it puts its legs in the air and it does sort of na 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 na. So in between that sort of and a really aggressive state, there's 12 states. So for me, that is really important to think of like again system behavior, that you not have a dress that is just attacking in one state, but that it has different levels. So the legs are based. The whole piece is being 3D printed in nylon, SLS as well, and there's like servos in the shoulders with little servo controllers in the shoulder plates. The dress itself is based on the spider. The eyes of the spider have the sensors in there. The design itself is built from bird bones, snake bones, sort of. For me, it's really important that design has, when you look at it, it has the same effect than when you interact with it, sort of. If you look at this design, it gives you a sort of a psychological thrill. So when you interact with it, it's really attacking, sort of. Whether, for example, the smoke dress is a more a pear form shape, so it's a little bit more a friendly shape, sort of. And also the mood and the behavior of the smoke dress is a little bit more adapted to be more like free fall, like more flowy, sort of. There's in the sides, which I call the kidneys here above, you can see them in the sides, there's a respiration sensor. Because with my former dress, what I had is that people came into the space and my model was interacting with them and the system kept on attacking, sort of. And it just became a little bit annoying. And now what she does is she breathes in and she breathes out, and the design is going into a more lynching position, so it quiets down, sort of. And this is for me about learning the notion of a system to be a system to be sort of codependent. It's about codependency or like working together, the system, the technological system and the human body sort of. So this is a sign, and for me it's a lot about like fashion, seeing fashion as an interface, and then this interface becoming a tool sort of. Close. So the system is here on the back, and you see all the wires coming up, sort of servo controllers under the shoulder, servos in the legs. Those are the respiration sensors, proximity sensors in the front. They're measuring out, they're beaming out, they're ultrasonic rangefinders. What we also created with Intel was like a series of spiders that go with the dress. So they're also printed in SLS. And we took them to the Maker Faire because the dress was not always possible to take to the Maker Faire. With this story, it's really funny because we created them as sort of entities, and then you have all these kids, and the kids just take them and walk away with them. So it ended up all the Intel employees, including me, sort of, that were standing there having to hoard the children the whole time in order to get the spiders there, instead of us like sort of dancing around with the spiders. So that was a funny thing. Yeah. So then the last part what I want to point out is the community. So the Maker Faire is one thing. I don't know if you guys know it. I've been to the one in Ottawa. I don't know if there's one here. Maker Faire is for example, it started in the Bay Area, and it's a really big science fair for children and for grown-up children, called mature people, to come and to gather around and to do fun stuff. And it's just this really cool thing that starts to spin off. Sort of, it's in Rome. It's like it's everywhere in the world. So yeah, I am really close in contact with the Make community because I think they're awesome. These are kids, and this is not my design. These are kids in Vienna, in Austria. And what they did is, instead of like sort of like, I guess, reverse engineering. Yeah, they did reverse engineer the design. So this is spider dress, and what they did was they made a spider dress out of Lego. And I think this is so fantastic because I don't know how many of you guys know the medium of Lego. Like, it's a pretty hard medium to shape in, sort of. And if you do like sort of creating these structures, is really, really awesome. So what they did was they didn't only created the front of the design, like the whole corset bodies kind of thing. They also took in consideration the system on the back and also the mechanic legs here. So I found this out through, I don't know how, somebody sent it to me, and I was like, oh, that's fucking awesome, that's so cool. So I sent them a message like, hey dudes, this is so cool what you guys did. And they were like, oh, I'm so sorry that we reverse engineered your design. And I was like, no, this is like super awesome. So, and I also told them that I will show it to everybody here. So then they liked it very much that they got the feedback from me. So what they also did is they took the cocktail dress and they made a cocktail dress out of Lego. So, and they presented this at Robotics, which is a cocktail making festival in Vienna in December. So I think these kids are like super badass. I should put their names in, and we'll do it for the next one. But I think this is just so cool, like this creativity that spins off from other things, you know. And that's my last part that I want to point out, sort of education. So making and sharing with your community. Like, one thing for us is to make cool shit, which we can do, and a lot of us here are really good at it. But then the other thing is sharing that also with your community, sort of, you know, sharing that back with the community. For example, from my point of view, there's a few things. For example, GitHub for code, Make Magazine, Maker Faire, which I point out. Thingiverse is for 3D files. Instructables is an do-it-yourself website in collaboration with Autodesk, where you can put up like full projects, sort of, you know, step by step how you do things, and that can be from making tomato soup to making a cocktail dress. My cocktail dress is on there, for example. Hexter.io is, for example, regarding to hardware. You can find a lot of hardware projects on there. And then the last one is OpenBCI, which I like because of the brain stuff, sort of. So it's an open source community, which a big group is part of, sort of, regarding to like figuring out EEG and brain-computer interfaces, sort of. So yeah, a lot about like open sourcing and sharing it back, not only taking it but also sharing it back to the community in however way you want to design that, sort of, you know. I think that's pretty badass if you do that. So to conclude my story, my general story, this story was about analog versus digital, seeing fashion as an interface, and then this interface becoming a tool. So basically you have a playful interface, an emotional interface, and also a social interface. And thank you.